Tonight, KARE 11 investigates the case of a Minnesota man who spent more than 2 decades in prison, even though he may be innocent. Lauren Lemanchek says the state attorney general's office thinks the man should be exonerated, but a local prosecutor is trying to keep him behind bars.
At a roadside convenience store, a crime that shocked a small town. The 84-year-old owner, Evelyn Malin, murdered in the back bedroom. This BCA crime scene video from 1998, never seen publicly before now, could hold key answers to the question: did authorities convict and jail the wrong man?
None of the story works.
That man, Brian Pippitt, has been in prison more than 2 decades. Attorney Jim Cousins has for years been trying to prove his innocence.
No part of the state's case holds up at all. Mr. Pippitt had nothing to do with this. He's completely innocent.
Then in May, a big break. The Minnesota Conviction Review Unit, part of the Attorney General's office, dropped this bombshell report. The finding? Pippitt should be exonerated for the murder of Evelyn Malin. When the case went to trial, the prosecution claimed Brian Pippitt and 4 other drunken men broke in through a small basement window to steal beer and cigarettes, beating Evelyn Malin to death during the robbery. But experts who reviewed the case for the Attorney General's office say it couldn't have happened that way. The first problem, that basement window.
If they went through the window, how did they manage not to scrape their clothing or stir up a bunch of the material inside the window well?
Linda Netzel, an expert crime scene investigator, was struck by the small size and the fact that there were no traces of clothing or human blood on the frame. What's more, the boxes below the window weren't damaged. Based on your experience, this doesn't add up.
It does not add up. It definitely does not add up.
And what about the beer and cigarettes, the alleged motive for the break-in? Photos and video cast doubt on that, too.
If it's true that these gentlemen went to the store to steal beer and cigarettes, then why were there no beer and cigarettes missing? The only room that was trashed was Evelyn Malin's. That was it.
Tom Murtha was Pippitt's public defender decades ago. This was your first murder trial, correct?
Yes, I graduated in '98, and this was my very first homicide trial, yes.
The AG's report concludes he was too underexperienced and overburdened to challenge the prosecutor's theory at trial.
As a public defender at the time, we were working on a shoestring budget, and so you rely on the fact that the state isn't going to pull a fast one on you. The Minnesota Attorney General's office proved that that's what happened.
He means withholding evidence. According to the Attorney General's Review Unit, the prosecution presented unreliable testimony that the murderers could have escaped through the front door, even though this crime scene photo shows a deadbolt lock still in place. That means if they left through that door, they would have needed a key to relock it. Did Brian Pippitt get a fair trial?
No.
In fact, 2 key witnesses have since recanted. One, who back then cut a deal on his own murder charge.
Do you swear the testimony?
The other, Peter Arnaldi, who testified Pippitt confessed to him while they were both held at a mental hospital. In this deposition 4 years ago, Arnaldi said he got it wrong.
I now believe that Brian Pippitt at the time was telling me what he was accused of.
Not confessing to the crime. Despite the Attorney General's finding that Brian Pippitt is innocent, the Aitkin County Attorney's Office is still fighting his release. They argue Arnaldi changed his story only after being pressured by Pippitt's counsel. And they point to this recent BCA reenactment showing it is possible for people to climb in through the small basement window and climb back out. But watch carefully. See how this man's clothes get caught on the frame? Exactly what the Attorney General's expert predicted.
That window, just in my opinion, was not the point of entry.
So where does all this leave Brian Pippitt after a quarter century behind bars?
And so there's a lot of emotion wrapped up in this and a lot of frustration. There's some anger involved as well.
Once again, with his fate in the hands of a judge who could determine once and for all what really happened in a secluded country store all those years ago. A hearing's not been scheduled yet, and the Aitkin County attorney declined to comment on camera, but points out that a long time ago, an appeals court and even the Minnesota Supreme Court reviewed this case and upheld Pippett's conviction. I also spoke with Evelyn Malin's daughter-in-law, who was there for the trial. She told me this dredges up a lot of emotions, but she believes justice was done when Brian Pippett was convicted. For KARE 11 Investigates, I'm Lauren Lemanchek.